The deep, permeating sense of loneliness that we see in our society today has reached beyond unhealthy levels. We are, in fact, dealing with a loneliness epidemic. So many people in our world today have this sense of disconnection, even though they're spending much of their time around other people, they still feel that sense of loneliness. So how is that even possible? If you look at the definition of loneliness online, one of the descriptions is that it's caused by social isolation. Well, if you're not socially isolated, if you're surrounded by other people, how is it that loneliness is something that people are still nonetheless dealing with? And it doesn't really make much sense at first glance, but it becomes very clear once you delve into it and understand it. So loneliness is something that I've dealt with myself from time to time in the past. And in these moments, even though I was around other people, I would nonetheless still feel alone. I would be hanging out with other people, talking, laughing, joking, or at least pretending to. And it wasn't until I left and went home and was actually alone that I could begin to really process this feeling. You know, where was it coming from? Why did it happen in certain situations? And why did it happen with certain people? Well, as I've been on my journey of growth and personal development these last 6-7 years, that source for that loneliness began to show itself. And ultimately, when I was able to find that source, I was thus able to overcome the loneliness itself. You see, we live in a world that is more connected than ever before. With the advent of the internet, we've gotten to a place where we can connect and communicate with anyone across the world. No matter where someone may be and what corner of the world they may be living in, or whether we've crossed paths with that person in real life or not, there is a way via the internet for us to communicate and to connect with that individual. It's truly a remarkable feat given our history. You see, our ancestors lived their entire lives in these small areas among this small community with a certain amount of people, and they knew these people from the day they were born to the day they died. They didn't have the capability to explore the world like we do today and to meet new people like we do today. It just wasn't a possibility. We truly live in an incredible time, but with this amazing capability comes a drawback. You see, the more we get intertwined with the internet, the more we get intertwined with our phones, the less we are connected to the real world. We may be communicating with more people online than our ancestors ever could have imagined to, but we're communicating with less people in person. And not only that, but we're surrounded by people that we don't know. Science tells us that for much of human history, we lived in groups no larger than about 150 people. This means that we knew everybody. We knew them on a first name basis, and even if we weren't deeply, connected and had a deep relationship with somebody, we at least felt safe with them. We knew them. We had a history with that person. Well, nowadays we live in these massive cities, and even if you live in a rural area, you still probably have several hundred to several thousand people that live in your town. And that's still so many more people than our ancestors ever would have personally experienced. Now, when you couple in the fact that so many people live in these massive metropolitan cities of 1, 5, 10, 20, 30 million people, it's no wonder that loneliness is so widespread. There's no way that you could ever know all of these people. It's impossible. Plus, add to the fact that when you don't know somebody, you don't trust them. And when you don't trust someone, this increases a sense of stress and even a sense of fear. So we go through our lives surrounded by people everywhere, but we don't know them. And then we go on the internet and try to connect with people, at least on there, but we don't see that person. In some cases, we may not know their name, we may not know where they're from, and we may not even know what they look like. We can't even put a face to a name in many cases. So how are we ever supposed to feel connected, truly connected to someone via the internet? Now you see, there's something very, very critical, very crucial about seeing someone in person, about having that one-on-one interaction and connection with somebody. You can see their demeanor, how they act. Are they nice? Are they not? What sort of body language do they have? What do their facial expressions look like? Do they listen to you, or do they just like to talk? All of these things help us to understand the other person and ultimately build a connection with them. And you see, at the end of the day, we can't override our biology. Humans have been communicating with one another in person for as long as we've been around, and science tells us that anatomical human beings have been around for about 250,000 years. That's a long time. And so this shift to communicating via social media or via, the internet in general, it's a huge shock to our system. Now, this issue of spending much of our time online seems to really impact some of the younger generations, mine and even the younger ones since my generation. But even some of the older generations are also being affected by it. It's become a norm for people to look at their phones when in a public setting and they have nothing to do. Whereas back before phones were a thing, you would strike up a conversation. You would sit there bored, have nothing to do, and you would just talk to somebody and get to know somebody. You can go to a restaurant nowadays and you'll see a group of, younger folks, a younger generation, and they're all sitting there together, but they're all looking at their phones. And I'm not pointing fingers because it's something that I've been guilty of myself in the past. It's truly something that I've had to be conscious of not doing. So ultimately, we're connecting less in person and trying to connect more via the internet. Well, at the end of the day, the internet is a machine. It's something that we've created. But we humans, we're living beings. We have emotions, we have feelings, and that's not something that a machine can fulfill for us. Now, going back to how I was able to overcome loneliness in my own life, it ultimately comes down to one simple thing. It came down to me knowing myself. You see, even though we may be surrounded by so many people in our daily lives, we may not have a deep connection with those people. It may all just be surface level relationships. Well, the ability to create deep, meaningful connections comes from being like-minded and being similar to someone else. You see, a lot of times we spend much of our days with people that we don't necessarily agree with on important topics, or we don't necessarily see eye to eye with on certain things. Or we're simply surrounded by people who don't bring us a lot of joy in our lives. Maybe we're friends with someone that we've known for so long, we used to have some similarities, but now we've grown apart. Well, as we continue to spend time with that person, the more and more we continue to feel disconnected. Now, think about multiplying that to an entire group, a group that you spend much of your time with, a group that you don't have a lot of similarities with. This is what I experienced. The entire group of friends just didn't fit me. It's not that they were bad or not good enough, but rather that we were just different. And because I was spending a lot of time with this group, I would begin to feel lonely and a bit detached. And that really made me start to think there has to be a reason for why I'm feeling this. But as I began to delve inward and I began to understand myself, that's where I learned what I care about, what my values are, what pushes me in life, what things I'm interested in, what sort of activities I'm not interested in, and ultimately it helped me to understand what sort of people I enjoy spending time with, what sort of people make me happy. And that's truly when I began to understand the source of that loneliness. So ultimately what I'm saying is that it comes down to you. Who are you? What do you like and what don't you like? Most people don't know who they are deep down because they don't ever stop to think, why am I feeling certain things and what can I do to fix that feeling? But once you begin to figure yourself out and really understand what you enjoy and what you care about and the sort of values that you hold, that is when you can start to surround yourself with like-minded people. People who interest you, people who make you laugh, and people who you can make a real, deep, meaningful connection with. And there's so many ways to do this, and that's one of the wonderful things about the internet, is that the internet actually does give us the capability to connect with people on a deep sort of level in person. Things like meetup.com are a great resource for meeting people that are like-minded and you have similarities with. Now, I'm not sponsored by them or anything, I just know that they are a good resource for this sort of thing. There's also Facebook groups and networking events and intramural sports and so many different activities and groups and organizations that you can become a part of to meet people that are similar to you. At the end of the day, we as humans, we require that one-on-one connection with another person. But it all starts with you getting in touch with yourself, figuring out who you are. What do you care about? What makes you happy? What do you not care about? What interests you? What bores you? All of this is very, very important to ultimately push you in the direction of feeling connected, feeling happy, and feeling fulfilled in life. But you have to make sure that you're real with yourself, that the things that you tell yourself that you care about aren't just what the group that you've been hanging out with says that they care about. Is this something that you truly believe in? Is this something that you truly enjoy? You have to open up to yourself and be truthful to yourself. Loneliness can be overcome. Don't ever forget that. And though you may be dealing with it right now, just know that brighter days are ahead. You just have to be true to yourself. Now, there's one final thing that I'd like to add because somehow I just happened to forget it while filming this video initially. What I mean by knowing yourself is that you get to a point where you're happy with yourself. You don't need anyone in your life to make you happy. You are your own source of happiness. You see, most people look outward when they want to feel good. They look for someone or for something to make them feel better. Essentially what they're doing is that they're just distracting themselves. That's why so many of us start a new relationship as soon as we've ended an old one, because we can't stand the idea of being alone. We look to others to bring us joy, but that's a formula for disaster. Listen, you can't rely on others to make you happy. People are going to do what they want. You can't control them. So getting to a place of internal joy and internal peace where you don't rely on outside forces to bring happiness into your life, that is what is going to bring long-term happiness and fulfillment. And when you have true happiness within, then loneliness can no longer exist. So if you enjoyed the video, hit that like and subscribe button. Comment below if you have any questions or thoughts, or maybe there's certain things that you'd like me to make a new video on later. And as always, folks, improve your body, improve your mind, improve the world.